You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Hello, and thanks for joining Revolution 250, where we look at events that took place 250 years ago this week. This is from the American Revolution Podcast, a short bonus episode to remind you about these important anniversaries of the Revolutionary War. This week, we remember the Prohibitory Act and the Battle of Canebrake in South Carolina, which both took place on December 22, 1775. In December of 1775, as the year drew to a close, Britain had been in a state of active war with the North American colonies since that spring. The Continental Congress had still tried to convince the king to broker a compromise between Parliament and the colonies, but the king refused. Instead, he had called on Parliament to crush the rebellion with military force. Colonies would have to submit to the king's mercy before he would decide whether or not to grant any. While both sides had taken steps to prepare in the years leading up to the outbreak of war, neither side seemed fully ready to embark on such a large war. The British Army throughout the entire world was only about 50,000 regulars when the war began. Many of those soldiers had to remain where they were, protecting Britain itself as well as other colonies in other parts of the world. There would also be considerable expense in trying to enlist and train thousands of new soldiers, so the king did the next best thing. He rented several armies from different German states. The largest contingent came from Hesse. The contracts were signed near the end of the year, but it would be months before the armies shipped out for America. Until Britain could assemble and move a large army over to North America, it had to rely on the Navy to accomplish much of anything. So, on December 22, 1775, Parliament passed the Prohibitory Act. This act banned all trade and commerce going to or from the colonies that were in a state of rebellion. Any ships that were found to be coming or going from American ports would be seized and deemed forfeited to the king. The cargo the ships were carrying would also be forfeited, and the crew could be impressed into the service of the British Navy. As an incentive, the crew of any British ship of war that captured such a prize would receive a share of the value of the ship and its cargo. The king gave his assent to the Prohibitory Act the following day, although the act would not go into effect until March of 1776, giving time for British merchant ships to get the word about the new law. When word of the Prohibitory Act reached America in early 1776, following on that king's speech calling for war and the hiring of Hessian mercenary armies, these actions swelled popular support for independence in America. Now, also on December 22nd, the same day Parliament passed the Prohibitory Act, the Continental Congress authorized the construction of 13 frigates to form the core of the Continental Navy that would challenge the British on the high seas. Also on that same day, Patriot soldiers in South Carolina executed another mission. A few weeks ago I mentioned that there had been a truce at Fort 96 in South Carolina that had allowed both Patriot and Loyalist forces to go home under an agreement. In December, the Patriots learned the location of a Loyalist force that was still out in the field, about 200 men led by Captain Patrick Cunningham. They were hiding out beyond the frontier in Cherokee Territory. Patriot Colonel Richard Richardson ordered his Patriots to capture these Loyalists. Major William Danger Thompson led about 1,300 Patriots on a night march into Indian Territory. At dawn on December 22nd, the Patriots surrounded the Loyalist camp. The Loyalists were mostly sheltering from the cold rain and snow flurries. Caught off guard, the men put up little resistance. There was a short battle of a few minutes. About 70 of the Loyalists escaped, including Captain Cunningham. 6 of them were killed, but the majority of Loyalists, about 130, were captured. The Patriots suffered only 1 man wounded. The action, which, as I said, only took a few minutes before it was over, became known as the Battle of the Great Canebrake. Among the Patriots, who, as I said, suffered almost no casualties, suffered more in the following days of marching through snow with inadequate clothing and no tents in what became known as the Snow Campaign. I hope you've enjoyed this Revolution 250 moment. To get more context about the events I discussed today, check out episodes 71 and 77 of the American Revolution podcast. I also encourage you to subscribe for free on whatever podcast platform you like, Spotify, Apple, whatever. Thanks again for listening to this Revolution 250 moment on the American Revolution podcast.